Hey nerds! I'm going to go over some of the settings to get Caustics up and running in Redshift. So I'm using Cinema 4D here and I have a basic scene set up. I've just got a sweep background with just a plane with a bend deformer on it. Got a camera set up to 100 millimeters here and a dome light with an HDRI in it, but I've got the exposure turned way down, just like -3. And I just want to do that just to get some of the reflections going in the glass objects we'll be making. It's not really contributing much light to the scene. I'll do a test render there. It's just dark gray. I also have a center target null, which I'll use for a target for the spotlights and objects we'll be putting in the scene. All right. Also, I've got just a basic dark gray material here, dark gray in the diffuse, and I've got a weight in the reflection of 0. And I have that applied to the sweep. Also, just want to go over some of the render settings here before I get started so you know where I'm at. Here I've got the samples min set to 16 and samples max set to 256. I've got a sample override on the reflection of 1024. I've got GI turned off for now, don't need it. Yeah, that should be it. Oh, I also have some AOVs set up here so we can just take a look. When we start to clean up these images and start to try to get the caustics to be less grainy, I wanted to use these as an example to show, just to sort of isolate the caustics from some of the other passes. So we can take a look at that a little bit later. All right, so let's go ahead and put just a sample object in the scene. I think we'll just do a basic cylinder for now. And I will turn on the fillet for the caps and just do a subtle little roll off on the edges. And we'll just do a basic Redshift material and apply that to the cylinder. Then we'll go up to add a spotlight into the scene. And I'm going to right click on the spotlight, go to Cinema 4D tags and down to target and grab my center target null into the target object. And now can move this spotlight around and get this lined up so it is a good spot for our cylinder or something like that. All right, we'll do a little test render here and we've got this crazy thing here. Let's raise this up a little bit more. Oops. All right. Okay. So we've got just a basic material on our cylinder and a spotlight on it. Let's go into the material and we can use, for now, we'll just use the preset for glass. And this will update and now we have a glass cylinder in the scene. All right. So in order to get caustics on this, we have to do a couple things. We need to add a tag on our cylinder. So we're going to go to cylinder, right click on it and go to Redshift tags, Redshift object. And down under the visibility tab or section, we want to click on override. And down here, cast caustic photons. We want to check that on. All right. And if we do something now, re-render, we'll see that it doesn't do anything. We need to go up into the spotlight and turn photons on for the spotlight. And under the photon section, come down to caustics, emit caustic photons. We want to check that on. Now, do a render, take a look here, and we've got something. All right, and it's pretty rough. We can see here there's lots of grain. The default settings aren't giving us a clean render at all. All right, so a couple things we can do to fix this. In this scene here, these caustics coming off of this cylinder are pretty basic. They're just sort of rounded shapes. So one thing we can do, up in the settings, up here, up in the Redshift render settings, we can go to, actually before I do it, let me just save this over to the picture viewer and we have a reference here. Okay, so we go up over to the Redshift settings under Photon. We've got some options here. Now, you see this here, max number caustic photons. This seems like something you'd want to adjust and change and get a better result. But actually, this is tied to the caustic search radius down below. And I'm not really sure exactly how this works, but this has something to do with the number of photons that are stored in the limit for the search radius and affects how many of them are averaged out when you adjust this number. it's recommended to just leave this as the default. This isn't going to really change the look of these at all. So let's just, for an example, take this caustic search radius from 0.1 up to, I don't know, like 5. Crank it way up here and do a re-render. Okay, so big difference. Let me stop this and send it over to the picture viewer. So we can see here, before, after, big difference. But if we zoom in, oh, we're already at 200%. Let's go to 400. You can see there's some, I don't know if you can see this in the screen capture, but it's smoother, but we still have this splotchiness here. So all this has done is basically just blurred the results from this image. So that's one way to do this. And it's not too bad. If this is just one object in a scene, this could be the way to go. Just leave the render times low, keep the number of photons in your light set pretty low, and call it a day. But let's see if we can get some better results here by putting this back to the default. And let's crank this up. Let's add another 0 onto this and re-render this and see what this does. So we have 10 times the amount of photons in the scene. And let this finish, and then we'll send it over to the picture viewer to compare. All right. So now this is with 10 times the amount. I'm going to 200% again. 10 times the amount as this one. And it's a big difference. So, and the render times, let's see, what was this? 10, 11 seconds. So it's a little bit longer, but not too bad. Let's do it again. Let's add another 0 onto this. So that was 11 seconds. Let's try this one. Okay. So that rendered in 23 seconds, almost 24 seconds. Send it over to the picture viewer and we can compare. All right, and I believe this is, what is this, 1 million? 10 million? 10 million photons? Oops. Let's go back to the picture viewer. Okay, 200% we can compare. All right, so this is 10 million photons, 1 million photons. So it's a pretty good job. So maybe bouncing back and forth, if this is close enough, maybe now come up and take the search radius to, I don't know, 0.5? Re-render this. Let's see. Okay. So this is 22 seconds for this render. We've increased the search radius to 0.5, okay? And let's go over to the picture viewer and compare. So this is with a 0.5 search radius. You can look here, a little grainy. You can see a little bit of noise. Let's see here, smoother results. It could be okay. Now this is 200% as well, so I mean, go back to subtle difference. Looks a little dimmer with the smoothing on, 0.5 smoothing. Averaging these things out, they get a little bit duller. There is some, I want to check this out here. Let's look at this a little closer, because there are some kind of like these little fragments here that I don't think should be there, but I think it's because of our subdivision. So I think we're seeing the faceted polygons of our cylinder. So under our object tag, let's go over to geometry. We're going to override the geometry, click on enabled for tessellation, and we'll use some of the Redshift built-in smoothing on this. We're going to take off screen space adaptive and just take this to like, now let's do 2, take this to 0. All right, now let's render this again and see what we get. See if that fixes that kind of like, I don't know, striation in the caustics. Okay, yeah, big difference. Let's send this over to the picture viewer. Take a look. Okay, so big difference here between that. Completely different result. Interesting. Okay, so let's maybe add something in here that has some more and I'll give some a little bit different pattern into this. Okay. All right, now let's do a render. Okay, so we've got some patterning here. Let's take a look at that. A little bit more interesting than before. All right, so let's go back up and take the search radius back down to default, 0.1. And under the spotlight, we've got an option here called Intensity Multiplier. What I want to do is just bring up the brightness of these caustics here, the caustics pattern. So let's take this up to like 3. And move this over a little bit. Okay, and let's do a re-render. Okay, so 30 seconds for that render. Big difference. So we can see here, increasing the intensity multiplier made this brighter, but it also, brought these other very minor, subtle little caustic patterns here up a lot brighter, which also increased the noise here. So we can now see a lot more graininess in this than we did before. So that's kind of the downside to cranking this up. You're kind of cranking the gain on all of this stuff, and so you're going to get more of this noise introduced. So the option then is to either go back and blur this out, which I kind of don't want to do because we can take a look, but this pattern over here is nice. I want to keep that. The more we crank this up to clean up this noise, the more we lose these subtle patterns that become blurred. So let's take this down to 2. So it's not so bright, and we'll double the amount of photons in the scene. We'll just take this up to, I guess, 20 million. I think that's what that is. Yeah, 20 million. Let's render this and take a look. Okay, we've got 43 seconds on that one. So it gained 13 seconds. From 30 seconds up to 43. So we go from this to this. So dimmer, obviously, and a little cleaner, but we still have some noise in this. And if we go over to, I can't use the layers on this, but if we go over to the AOVs we have set up here, we can look at just the caustics for this. And we can see in here, I don't know if you can see it in the screen capture, this sort of isolates here the noise in the caustic. So I can see here we've got some graininess in here. So, maybe 0.1. Let's try 0.3 and see if this will clean it up enough. Take this back to beauty and hit render again. Okay, 41 seconds. So it actually rendered a couple seconds quicker. And let's go back here and compare the two. So this is the new one, and that's the old one. So things do get a little bit dimmer and a little blurrier. You can see not much though. So it did a pretty good job of cleaning this up, but we do sacrifice a little bit of that brightness. So if caustics, like in this case, caustics are star of the show, we want to showcase these things. Do we then have to crank up the brightness a little bit more and find that balance again? So that's sort of the basics of caustics at this point. So what we have is, a light that has photons set to emit caustic photons. The object, any object in the scene that you want to emit caustic photons, and that's either reflected off of like a shiny surface, like chrome or silver, or refracted through it, or both, of glass. I can show you here. Let's do another. Or we just change this material from glass over to, I don't know, let's do copper. And we already have the tag on there, so it's already visibility, caustic photons. We'll do another test render so you can see that caustics is also the reflected off of like shiny chrome or something like that, in this case copper. Okay, there we go. So 37 seconds. So that's over the picture viewer. So you can see here we've got caustics on this as well, reflection off of this shiny copper. Still see the the noise in this, and to me I think this is just a little bit too noisy. If this was for a production render, a final render, probably would want to add like at least double or triple the amount of photons in the scene if we're this close to it, rather than blurring it, because I think what will happen is we just get that splotchiness that the granular pattern here just becomes bigger. So I tend to just, if I have the time, just crank up the photons in the light and then just wait for it to render, especially if it's this close. If you have a bunch of objects in the scene, they're further away, you can get away with just blurring them out, not noticing them as much. I did want to mention, so if we go back over here to glass and instead do tinted glass, we have a red color here. I guess we can just make that a little bit more. We'll go to like a green. And let's try this out. And this is really just automatic. So we're going to get the color of the absorption, I guess the transmittance color in this case, of the glass is going to automatically create a colored light pattern on the ground. The caustics will automatically take on the color of the material they're passing through. There's no extra step to set that up. And there we go. Okay, 40 seconds, and we'll add that over to the picture viewer. As you can see, these have a green tint to them, and no extra step. It's already in there. And in fact, you can even, if you wanted to, let's go and do a ramp. Spell it right. Ramp. And we'll leave it as a UV map and go orange to, I don't know, like a bright blue. Pull these in a little bit so there's more of this. We can use this ramp to drive the, let's see here, transmission, I think refraction transmittance, I think is what we want. Let's go back and check. Go down here to the color, right, all right, grayed out. So let's give this a render. Okay, so we can barely see that. Let's take this absorption scale up to 5. Try it again. Okay, so I've got the twist on this that's twisting the UVs around. That's weird. Let's go to, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, you get the point. So we've got both, I'll pass this over to the picture viewer. It's weird. So we've got this, both the orange and the blue patterning here from the glass coming through in the caustics pattern. It's kind of unexpected. I didn't expect it to do that. All right, anyway. So all that's automatic. You get the color of the material that will pass on the color to the caustics. That's all automatic. Now, a couple other things that that affect the caustics. So it's kind of difficult sometimes to know what you're looking for. If you wanted to have a scene that had a bunch of caustics on it, it's hard to imagine like what's going to produce the best results. So sometimes you think, oh, it's going to be crazy and ton of things all around the scene. It's just like one simple line, all the lights collecting in one area. So the index of refraction plays a role in that as well. So if we crank this up to like, I don't know, 2.5, something closer to like diamond, and then give this a render here, we'll take a look and see the different pattern that comes out from this. So we can see here, completely different pattern than we had before. changing that index of refraction has a significant effect. And we also have an option here. We'll go back to just glass. And an option for dispersion. And what this does is affects the way light is split into a spectrum as it travels through this material. And so you think like, oh, I'll just try a little bit of it. But actually, if we go to like 1, it's going to be a tremendous amount. So the way this works is very, very low numbers is an extreme amount of splitting of the light. A value of 0 it's not valid, so it's just turned off. So a kind of a standard range, I think, is between like 30 and 70. So if we do a little bit here, let's go to like, like maybe 37, that's fine. Okay, and we'll render this and take a look. All right, send over the picture viewer. You can see here we've got this nice sort of rainbow effect that's happening on these caustics. So if I can find this, I don't know if I have one where the camera's the same. Yeah, there we go. So from this to this, you can see this sort of splitting off, sort of the expansion of these caustic patterns here, and then this rainbow effect that's happening. We can try it here with an extreme number, which is like, like 0.7. Do it again. Woo, what? All right, let's look. That is crazy. So that to that. That's wild. All right, let's do, be like 6. Let that re-render. Oh, and if you're interested in matching real-world values to a material for dispersion, I believe the value there that you can Google is, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's spelled A-B-B-E, AB. But if you look up, if you do a Google search for that, or material or refractive AB value, you're able to see there's some charts online that have example numbers on there. All right, so this is ready. We'll send that back. So you see it's nice, beautiful. And that was the setting of 6.3. And the more you crank this up, like this in this area, 60 is almost off again. It's very, very subtle. Okay, oh, another thing that affects this. So right now I've got this glass is set to a roughness of 0. This is perfectly clear. So let's go back and turn off dispersion. Let's turn this off. As an example, so if I increase the roughness a little bit, not that much, just something that adds a little bit, be like, that's fine. And dispersion's off, okay. And render this out again. This is also something that's going to affect the clarity of the caustics, how rough the material is. And I do have the roughness of the reflection is still tied to the roughness of the refraction transmission. So we'll see the difference here in a second. I'll let this render. You can see here, we've got this sort of blurring effect happening with the, it's this sort of frosted glass look. And this is a little bit extreme. This is probably not realistic, but it's not also realistic to have it 100% perfectly reflective either. So this is sort of a way to, if you're looking for extremely realistic caustics, that search radius function, right now it's set to 0.3, but it, a more realistic thing may be something more like this sort of blurred or blurred setting. So, cranking this up may not be a bad option sometimes, if you're going for maximum realism. So right now what we have is just a spotlight in a scene, and pretty good results with this. So I'm going to set this back down to the roughness, back down to just a very small amount. Now, what if we have a scene that's already set up, and we want to add something with caustics into a scene with more complex lighting? We've got area lights, we've got HDRIs turned up. So let's see what happens here. Let's turn off our spotlight and take our dome light and go back over and crank this up. Now caustics should be off. We don't have anything emitting caustics anymore. So we turn the spotlight off, and even though we have caustics on for the object, there's nothing emitting them in the scene right now because I don't have caustics turned on for the dome light. And that looks pretty dull. Let's rotate this dome light. Let's zoom out here and see. Do I have this on? Let's take a look here at our scene. We can rotate this around. Whoops. The dome light. Rotate this around to get some better lighting. All right, there we go. Let's try this. Actually, let's go the other way. Yeah. All right, so let's say this was perfect. We wanted this sort of lighting here. It's super soft. And another thing we can do here in the material is take our shadow opacity up a little bit. It's kind of unrealistically low, I think. It might be realistic, I don't know, but it seems like things should be a little bit darker. Clear glass should have a little bit more shadow to it. So that's under advanced settings of the material, shadow opacity. You just crank this up until it's not like, until it's completely dark, but just move this up a little bit. Okay, so let's say we have this scene lit with an HDRI and we want to add caustics to it. Problem is, go to Photon here, turn off this render, turn it on and go back to what we had before. What was it, like 20 million? And it rendered in about, it was like 30, 40 seconds. And we'll take the intensity multiplier up to 2. What do we have in it? Yeah, so it's like the same thing. All right, so we've had the same photon settings, the object's the same. Let's take a look and see what this gives us. We're gonna back here, turn this on, and turn on bucket mode. Okay, a brutal 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Up from, what, 30 seconds? These last ones. So, and what we have here, I should close this too soon, is a mess. 20 million? Is that what we have? 20 million photons in the scene on this dome light, and it's just an unrecognizable, grainy mess. If we look at just the caustics pass, it's awful. So what's happening here? We've got our dome light shooting out 200 million photons, but they're going everywhere. The spotlight was a focused beam right on our caustics object. So there's 20 million photons being emitted from this light, and we have it set going in a very restricted area here. We've got it pointed, our spotlight, it's only in this area here. The dome light, it's going everywhere, and it's super inefficient. And what we've got here is just a mess. We can't use it. So what we can do to work around this and keep our lighting, let's go back to the beauty pass here and take a look here. Let's do another render without. Let's turn these back off and take a look at our lighting and see what we've got here for our shadows. I'm gonna do the right one. Okay. So it looks like we've got a light source over from, looks like we've got 2. a couple shadows here, a little bit harder one and a softer one, larger, brighter light source over on the left-hand side, coming this way. So it would be like, you know, maybe coming from over here. We can take a look. See if we've got this lined up right. We want to see if the shadow's going directly straight back from our camera. Yeah, it looks like it. So it looks like it's going straight back from us. So what we can do is take another light. We're going to do another spotlight and call this Caustics only. Okay, and some more tags, target, center target. Okay, Caustics only. And we want to put this light up kind of where our camera is. Like this. Okay. And now if we do another render here, let's go ahead and leave it on this view and see. So we've matched up our shadows pretty close. Looks a little bit, we can move this a little bit further away and take the angle down. General, under our Caustics only light, take this cone angle down. Just want to cover up where our object is. We want Caustics on it. Okay. If we go back to our main view and render, we're going to have a kind of a spotlight showing up over our scene, sort of a double shadow. Okay, exactly. Under our Caustics only light, let's go into Ray. We're going to take off Effects Diffuse and Effects Specular. Under Photon, we'll turn this on. Take this up to 2, and number of photons to emit, let's go, yeah, we'll go to 10 million. And now, well, for a second, let's turn these photons off. We render again. Since we took off our ray here, Effects Diffuse, Effects Specular, what we're getting is back to our normal HDR lit only scene. So the same as we had before. All right, say that to the picture viewer. So this is our beautiful, beautiful scene. We're super happy with it. We just want to add Caustics in there. So now we go back to our Caustics only light. Under Photon, we turn on our photon, emit Caustics photons, render again. "41 seconds. So we have this 41 seconds down from, I don't even know if we saved it. It was terrible. Oh, we did save it. From this mess that was over 2 minutes. Now what we have is a very sharp, detailed caustic pattern here. And it technically, we can tell by the light source how, diffuse and soft the shadow is, that's not really what we would get. What we can do is take the spotlight and turn it into an area light. Make this pretty small. We don't need it to be that big. But area lights, because of their size, because of the area, they're shooting out all of this light in a sort of a broad pattern. You will get, noisier and more diffuse, more soft caustics. And we can give this a shot just to match our scene, but we'll probably have to tweak some settings here and probably have to up our search radius to clean this up. But let's take a look and see what this looks like. Of course, I did the wrong. Let's go back to this, start over. We can barely see anything. And so I've resized this light, which decreases its output power. Let's go back over to Ray and do effects specular, effects diffuse. Turn this back on. And let's go back to general and intensity multiplier. Let's do like, I don't know, just try 300 and see. Let's do a little test render here. $3,000? Okay, so maybe 1,000. Oops, 1,000. You can see this is affecting the scene. And, you know, another thing too, which since what we're going to do is be turning off effects diffuse, effects specular, we don't really need decay on anymore, because all we're using this for is just to shoot photons. We can turn this on to none, and that way if we move, you know, we don't have to do 1,000, this is like 1.5, 0.01. Let's try this. 0.001. The benefit of this is readjusting this or moving it around to change our shadow isn't going to affect the brightness. Once we get this dialed in, we don't have to tweak it anymore. So you can kind of see and get this lined up. To where we want. If we turn this off, we can see before and after. Seems pretty close. Okay. All right, let's go back to Ray and I'll turn these off. So now all it's doing is just firing these photons for our caustics. Okay, and we'll turn on bucket render and take a look and see what we got. Yeah, beautiful. Let's take a look here at just our caustics and see. And they're not bad. That looks pretty clean. And that was a about 49-second render. Slide that over to the picture viewer. So this is before, this is with our spotlight. You can see how sharp these caustics are. And with this area light, we've got much more realistic caustics with what our lighting would be in the scene. And now this other subtle, if we go back and look at our scene here, we can see that there's another light source that's making another harder shadow over here. So let's just duplicate our spotlight, our original one that we turned off, control drag. We'll turn that back on. And it looks kind of like this light's coming like here. So maybe like right like this. Let's take a look at our scene here and turn off our bucket render. We'll turn this spotlight off for now. So this looks like, I don't know if you can see that in the screen recording. We've got like a harder shadow, a secondary light source here that's creating another shadow right here. So we want to line this up straight ahead. And it's like coming from like right in here. Turn our light back on and let's see here. Oops. It's a little more narrow, and then we'll back this up. Okay, let's flip this off and check. Whoops, flip this off. Right through here. We'll see how this looks like. This needs to go up, whip down a little bit, extend that shadow a little bit further. There we go. Let's turn that off. It's very subtle. You can take this cone angle down as well. Okay, turn that off and back on. Okay, so now we'll go to Ray, turn off Effects Diffuse, Effects Specular, over the Photons, and really this is so subtle. Let's take this back down to 1 and maybe drop, whoops, just do like 1 million and Intensity Multiplier back down to 1. Back up here and let's do another render, see what it looks like. Okay, so I think that is just way too bright. Let's just point like 0.25. It's just overpowering everything. It's just going to be really subtle. I'm going to try that one more time. Okay, yeah, way better. So I think we've got this harder, very subtle shadow here from one set of lighting from our HDRI, and then the stronger sort of key light over from the left, creating these softer caustics through our object here. Okay, so I've got this scene here. So I've got a glass similar to the one in the last scene with these sort of bumps on it, and this half torus with the same sort of bumps, just to throw the light through this material around the scene a little bit. And this is just, these two things are just sitting on a plane in the middle of nowhere with an HDRI lighting it. I've got a, here I can just turn on the background here and do a quick render. I'll show you the HDRI. It's just a outdoor sunlight HDRI. It'll take a second to prepare this scene. Just an outdoor bright sunny day. Let this update for a second. There you go. Okay, so go back to the camera. So we've got this set up. There's two glass objects. And I have, on the dome light, I've got the photons turned off. And I've got a spotlight, zoom out a little bit here, a spotlight that's covering the glass. Now I've turned, on this spotlight, I've turned off the decay. So I was moving this around so much, I didn't want to have to go back and readjust the intensity or anything. I had that set, and then now I can tweak it without having to worry about it. So that is just covering this glass only. And I've got another spotlight that's covering the entire torus. And I can turn, I didn't turn the decay off on this one. I was able to adjust this pretty easily after I had the first one set. So I'll turn on Effects Diffuse, and well, here I can do a quick render here. And what I've done is just line this up to match this shadow as best as I could. So I'll use this top view here as an example, just like we did in the last scene. Just trying to match the shadow of the HDRI with the spotlight. You can see here. So I've got the spotlight just covering this object and not this glass, although it looks like I do have it just a little bit. So let me tweak that. I've got a target here for my spotlight, and I'm going to move this just forward a little bit. Whoops. My target. Let's see if this is going to update for me quick enough. There we go. Okay, so I'll move this. Okay. Okay, great. So now I'm not getting any of this object in this light. This is going to be only used to shoot photons for this object. And it looks like that is pretty close. So we'll say close enough. So I'm going to go back and turn off Effects Diffuse. So now this light is doing nothing for this scene. I do have photons turned on, but I'm not in bucket mode, so the photons, the caustics won't render. All right, so back to this main camera scene. I'm going to go ahead and send this over to the picture viewer, render out our full scene so you can see this scene with the caustics. Okay, and like 9 minutes later, we have this. It's beautiful caustics all over the place. So we've got the whole object, each object, lit by its own light. And full caustics on the whole thing. So now what if we had a scene that was a little more obstructed? So if we have something like this, I'm just going to do a quick render here. Actually, let me just pause this. It's a little bigger. We can see we've got all of the glass that's lit, but the torus only part of it. So what we want to do is have caustics on the glass like we had before, but instead of all of this torus getting lit with the caustic's light, we want to just limit it to this area inside this beam of light. So what we can do is come up here, and instead of using this spotlight covering the whole thing, I'm going to turn that off. We just want to match up this beam. Let's see if I can show you here from the top. So what I have is another spotlight that's only on this area. And I'll go back in and turn on, let's see here, effects diffuse on. Okay, so we want to adjust this a little bit just to line up with this beam of light. We want to match this right in here. So this needs to be hit, this whole section. What we're really focused on here is where this beam of light is hitting this torus. So let's turn off this spotlight for a second and take a look. Okay, turn our light back on. Okay, all right. Go back to our light and turn off effects diffuse. Now if we go back here, look at our photons. We're shooting a bunch, 60 million. And we have the intensity multiplier cranked up to 5. Same as it was before. Or same as the other light, excuse me. Same as this other light that was surrounding the whole thing. Turn it back on. It's got the whole object in it. But now we just want to limit it to just this little sliver. And so we'll turn that off and we'll do another render. And so here's the finished render. You can see we've got just the caustics happening inside this narrow beam of light, and this area here, go back where the caustics were all in this area, they are there no more. All right, and so basically that's the best way to be the most efficient with firing a bunch of photons into the scene, is using spotlights or very small area lights if you're trying to match more diffuse lighting. But really the only ways to clean up the caustics aren't going to be with, let's go over here, with the unified sampling. This isn't going to clean up the caustics. There's no sampling overrides for caustics. All you have is the photon number in the light and the photon caustic search radius here. Those are really the only things that are going to clean it up. And all this does is really just blur any sort of noise in your caustics that's there from lack of photons. All right. Yeah, so this is my first tutorial. So if you all enjoyed this and liked it and wanted me to go into other topics, or if there's something in here I missed, feel free to leave a comment. And yeah, let me know what you think. If there's anything I can do better, let me know. All right, thanks everybody.